Hello, I'm David Elliott, professor of horn at the University of Kentucky, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the sight reading portion of the All-State Audition. This is something that I think we probably don't prepare ourselves enough for, and I thought maybe it would be helpful to just give you a few ideas of some things to look at before you even start playing it. And I've called it in the sports term pre-game preparations. So the very first thing you'd want to look at is the key signature, and shortly I'll put a piece of music up here and actually show you what these are. But this tells you what key you're in. The meter obviously tells you the time signature, whether it's in 2/4, 3/4, 6/8, whatever. The clef is treble or bass usually. If you're a trombone player, it could be tenor. And then the tempo markings, there are two kinds of these situations where these are done. One is simply by the marking MM equals. Well, that stands for metronome marking. It will be equal 60 or something. Anyway, whatever that number is shows that's that many beats per minute. So that would give you some idea. Incidentally, a very easy way for you to figure out a rough approximation of any of these things is to look at your watch if you have a digital watch, and each second will click, and that would be 60. So if your tempo is 120, you try and go about twice as fast as each click. Transposition, this shows up for horn players once in a while, although I don't think you'll get this at All-State. But this is if it's in a key other than F, which means you'd have to do some transpositions. Most commonly that could be E flat, but I don't think you'll find that in the All-State Audition. Let's go back to the tempo markings. This is usually a set of Italian terms, and I've made up a list here which will be a little hard for you to keep track of in this short thing. So at the bottom I've showed you a good site where you can go online and get it, and I'll leave this on here a while and you can hit your pause button and copy that down, or you could just put in tempo markings and Google it. Anyway, these terms go from the very slowest up through the very fast, and it would be a good idea for you to try and memorize these, or at least get some idea. Andante is a very common one. That's just sort of a walking tempo, somewhere around 70 or 80 beats a minute, something like that. And Allegro, of course, is fast and various degrees of fastness. So again, take advantage of looking up the site, and I think you'll be able to find this set of terms. Looking ahead on this sheet, once you get ready to look at the stuff actually in the body of music, all this stuff appears ahead of it. I'll show you. You want to look for things like accidentals, notes that don't belong to the key signature, different articulation markings, staccatos, accents, tenuto marks, that sort of thing. Dynamics. This is something that often gets overlooked in sight reading, and if you really want to score well on that, you'll make some attempt at those. And then I think it's good to look for areas where you have more notes, where the notes get darker, because there'll be fast areas, and that's something that you want to be able to be comfortable with when you get there, instead of just coming at it from the beginning without having aware of it being there. Another thing is to check meter changes in the middle of a piece, to see if the beat stays the same or the note value stays the same. One or the other will always be the case, and so you want to have some thought about that. If it doesn't say anything or give you an indication, you can almost always count on the note value would stay the same. For example, the eighth note would be the same, and in one beat, in one measure, there might be quarter note getting the beat, so you'd have 2 eighth notes, and in the next measure you'd have maybe a dotted quarter with 3 eighth notes, but the length of the beat wouldn't be the same, it would be longer, but the eighth notes would stay the same. And then in the middle of it all, you might look for clef changes so that you don't get halfway through the piece and see a bass clef show up. That will happen quite often in horn sight reading. Most important in sight reading is the following. The rhythm is by far the most important thing you can get right. If you're playing in an ensemble and you miss notes or accidentals, that's bad enough. But if you miss the rhythm, then the ensemble is totally out of kilter. So whatever you do, be sure you try and keep the rhythm correct. And whatever you do, don't stop in a sight reading experience. If everything is going south, still try and keep the rhythm going, and keep playing as much as time as best you can. Let's look at a piece of music that might be a little more difficult than you get for sight reading, but it will again give us some idea of the things to look for. So the first thing we said, you look for the key signature. So you look over here and you see it's the unfortunate situation of having 5 sharps, which you hope you won't get. But if you do, then you simply play in B major, which is, of course, the scale you've all learned quite well, I hope. The next thing is the meter signature. And here you see it's common time, which means that there will be, in general, 4 beats to the measure. Then you look at the clef, and you see it's treble clef, which is what we play in most of the time. And the tempo marking in this case, moderato. So just sort of a, not fast, not slow, just sort of, just play. And then you see there's no transposition mark, so you can assume it's horn and F, and you play just what you normally would play. Now, the first thing that I would then look for into the body of the piece would be to see if there are any accidentals that take you out of the key that you're in. And in this one, there's one that shows up twice. This very interesting little thing here, and this is a double sharp. So what that would mean is instead of playing F sharp, you play a half step higher, which is a double F double sharp. In terms of reality, it's like playing a G natural. So if you see that ahead, you should be able to quickly put that in the back of your mind so that when you get down in the piece to there, you won't say, what in the world is that? The next thing to look for is articulations, and this piece has a lot of them. It's got tenuto marks here, so you'd see that. Basically, it's tenuto all the way. And unfortunately, in this one, I don't see any accidentals. I should have picked better. But nonetheless, you've looked for that. Then dynamics, and there's certainly a lot of them here. So you want to get a basic idea before you even decide what the dynamics are, how many different ones there are here. And you see the soft is this pianissimo one. That doesn't happen to the very end, so you just place as soft as you can there. But then besides that, we have 1, 2, 3 different dynamics. So what I would suggest you do in a case like this, you make loud really pretty bold. You make mezzo piano, sort of just the average sort of playing, and then you can make piano a little bit softer. And so you can give the relationships without having to think, well, how soft does piano have to be? Well, it's just softer than the other 2 that are above it, and forte would be the loudest you would play. Let's look for faster areas of notes. Well, obviously it's right over here. So you'd look at that and be sure you can figure out what goes on there. Fortunately, it's just basically down the B major scale, so you just go after that in that way. Then we look for meter changes, and this has got several of them in it. First off, we start out in 4/4 time, and then we go over to 2/4 and 3/4. Well, those are all pretty simple. You just keep the beat going, and one measure has 4, 2, 3. Then we get down to this second line when we have 2 measures that are in 3/8 time. And here's where the question comes up in your mind, I hope. Is the beat the same, or does the note value stay the same? Well, here it's been very clearly indicated that the 8th note equals the same. So the beat over here is going to be longer than it is here. So if you can think about it beforehand and over here start just counting 8th notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that would be a way to get through that. So if you take a good look at that, that would help you too. And this one does have 1 clef change, so you'd want to know that and figure out, in this case, what note that is. Well, if you can read bass clef, you know that that's an octave lower than that note, so that shouldn't give you too much trouble. And then back to treble clef. Remember, number 1, the most important thing is once you start, try and keep a steady tempo and try and get all the rhythms right, even if you miss a whole bunch of notes. Try and keep the rhythm the same. And whatever you do, don't stop and go back. Just start and go to the end. So I hope that helps some. And like anything else, you need to practice some sight reading. So ask your private teacher or your band director if you can borrow a few books of etudes or something, and sit down and do some practicing on this. So good luck with your sight reading.